everyone. I'm your host, Jason Schwartz, and I am here at the neutral zone. It's anything but neutral. Today, we have a wonderful guest. Dan Johnson is running for District 12 State House here in Maui, Hawaii. Where are the areas there, Dan, that you're covering?
Aloha, Jason. Yeah, thanks for having me. So
Cool.
I represent Upcountry Maui, effectively. That's Makawao, Pukalani, Kula, goes as far as Kanaio and some parts of Kaupo too. So that's for the state legislature, District
Right.
12.
What made you decide to run right now?
So I was born and raised in Maui. I grew up in Kihei, actually, and I moved very far from the nest to Upcountry. But yeah, I've got family here for 4 generations, born and raised, wife, kids, 2 sets of grandparents and everything like that. Maui's my home. And as time goes on, it just everybody can see how ridiculous the cost of living is here. And then I got family members, cousins that are pushed out of here that moved to Washington or some in Texas, and they didn't have any roots there before, and they just couldn't live in their home. And that's just sad. I can't imagine what that's like, to be forced to leave, versus, preference or opportunity. Those are different things, but the cost of living being one of the primary factors, and that's not a sustainable thing. Hawaii is pushing towards sustainability. I think sustainable living is another factor that needs to be pushed toward. But yes, so I am currently running for the state representative seat, District 12. Never had any experience in politics. I've been in construction for my career as a project manager for general contracting, solar, and different renewables and stuff like that for about 6 years now. Graduated from University of Hawaii at Manoa with a finance degree. So I got into budgeting and development kind of stuff like that. Had some law classes, did environmental law, business law, things like that. So I do a lot of contracts, project management, renewables, and just compounding with what I said to start about the cost of living here. I want to see something done about it. Really more of a Maui first perspective, because being born and raised in Maui, let alone Hawaii, you can see there's a Oahu centrism going on where our state's focused there, most of our population is focused there, and all of our infrastructure and funds primarily come from and go there. But Maui seems to be forgotten by comparison for some things. And I think we need a candidate that puts Maui people, Maui families first, not businesses first. Even though I'm running as a Republican, I'm pro-business, pro-enterprise, and all of that, but ultimately it's got to have a sustainable system for people to live in and grow in. Otherwise, you can have a great environment for business, but if there's no people, no residents that live there, you don't have a good system. So it's got to be healthy and happy for everyone.
So how would you recommend, when we talk about a sustainable situation, the cost of living are high, and most people would say, well, we're going to have to lower the prices somehow. How? And what can you do in the legislature that you think may help that? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so for cost of living, a couple of things that I want to do. And, you could pick a bunch of different issues. There's a lot facing us, but you got to focus on what you can tackle and do what you can about it. So for housing prices, looking at $1.1 million, I don't know, as the median home price. I don't know who can afford a down payment for that. That's insane. That's gone up about $500,000 in the past couple of years. So I don't know what kind of residential family can afford that. And then housing prices, mortgages ultimately affect the cost of rent, because there's different capitalization rates and debt service expenses that have to be covered for landlords as well. So some of this, I believe, is due to external investment, whether if that's foreign investment or even just other people in the mainland moving here that have more money. So we saw in COVID, a bunch of people working from home, like I'm doing right now. And they want to live in a beautiful place. And I don't doubt them for that or blame them, fault them for choosing to do so. But what happens is you have economic systems that provide more growth elsewhere than Hawaii. That's one of the core roots, is we're not a pro-business state. We're not a pro, small business, as far as that goes. I should rephrase that. But what we need to do, to finish here for
No,
expressly.
no, no. I'm trying to understand how. I know that I agree with you. You're right. We got to be pro-business, but how do we accomplish that? That I'm not clear on. That's if we all knew how to do that, we would already be doing that. Because I think a lot of us know that it's how do you grow a business? You have to have a population base to support the businesses. So we see companies from the mainland coming here, open up their chain stores, all these new places coming, but they're not owned by people from here. And they have all kinds of cash to be able to carry them through rough times, and things are crazy. It's hard to start things.
The past 2 years were not easy on local business owners, but yes, for housing specifically, as I was gearing up to there, when you have the housing prices being driven up externally more than what locals can afford, you hear about housing developments and affordable housing, and basically what they do is they have some developers and contractors that work with different authorities having jurisdiction, county, state, and whatnot, to get approvals to build these projects. A lot of times they're choosing, one example is they'll build like 100 homes and then they'll sell 4 of them for $700,000 at cost or something and call it affordable housing, and then everything else at 1.1 or 1.4 million. But that requires development of the land, and I love my landscape. I love Maui being country, so I don't want to see it grown more than it needs to. And I understand that we got to have housing for people, but one thing that I started thinking about is no one is doing anything about the existing housing, next to nothing. Like there's some first-time home buyer programs and different incentives that counties and states are doing, but what about removing the capital gain tax? So if you sell to a Hawaii resident, I would like to propose that you don't have to pay any capital gains on your sale to your home if it's going to be an owner-occupied property. So with Hawaii, we have an 11% tax rate on the state level. Can't do anything about the federal level, but the federal gives you a forgiveness of about $500,000 if it's a owner-occupied property. And the state of Hawaii, for example, like my family bought a home here a long time ago and might be looking at, if they sold it, paying somewhere like upwards of over $1 million in capital gains taxes. And if you look at that as a seller and you're selling to two options come before you. You got someone as a local family. They offer you, let's pick really round numbers. So let's say the home's listed at $1 million, and the first person comes to you with $900,000, and they're an owner occupant. They're going to live in Hawaii and be a member of this program. And then somebody else from the mainland has a lot of money and they want to move here and they're willing to pay you $1.1 million. But guess what? If you put the option in the seller's hands and encourage it from the state with taxes to shift it towards local residents, what you would do is you would tell them that they wouldn't have to pay any capital gains on their sale if they sell it to a resident. So you'd be buying a buffer back between local families and corporations, companies. Sometimes banks are buying up properties, and they're not going to be owner occupant, so they wouldn't qualify for that credit. So that way, it's very fair to anybody who's going to be a resident owner occupant. You can buy that back, and I think that's just one small thing that you could do to help with it.
And I think what you just said at the end was the most important thing. It's a small thing, and when you're talking about $1 million house and no one can afford it, they can't afford $900,000, $1.4 million. We need affordable housing, and the number's got to be a third of that. And you got to change what you call affordable. And you got to find how we going now. If we let that revenue go, what's the state going to do? How much revenue is it going to lose? And then that old story of, okay, we have less money. Now what are we going to do to solve 8 things with $1? So we run into a revenue problem.
I see you on that. I think the state should operate with a smaller budget and reduce the government in general to more essential services. However, when you look at what I was just proposing, what is the homeowner actually providing of economic value to the state? So let's say they bought a house for $100,000 40 years ago, and then through the factors of inflation and market craziness, their home is just worth more now. So what did they actually provide to the state that is of taxable value, to be honest? So what are they taking from the state, in other words? by not. What is the state foregoing? They're just foregoing taking more money out of the transaction that they really didn't encourage or foster.
I'm not worried about who encourages and foster. I'm saying right now, whether one encourages or foster, we've got this system to maintain. I definitely appreciate, like you do, there's so many jobs that I'm sure, we can streamline. We still are not getting all the services we need. So people would say, why are you cutting jobs? We're not getting enough services now. We need more jobs. And we say, okay, wait, what pocket do I take it from now? Now we just lose this revenue. We lose this revenue. I'm constantly wondering, like we said, how much are people willing to pay for the services that they demand? And
yeah,
oftentimes they're not willing to pay. They're trying to pay less and less and less and tell the government that they want them to do it. That's a rough deal, no matter where you sit. It's like,
so there's,
I don't know.
Yeah, there's so many layers that macroeconomic, microeconomic, and the local and world perspective that contribute to why our economy is priced as it is.
At a state level, do you feel you can make specific? I mean, I see that. I just think it's not the bulk. Where the bulk of the problem is we've got to have enough affordable housing. We've heard people here talk about, to tax, like you say, to people with second houses, to change their tax tier and make it so high that it's not a good idea to be having rental income property here because we're going to tax you so heavily on it. So getting more people.
Yeah, like I said, for local residents first, we clearly have no problem with demand to be in Hawaii. So I think that we can not tax our locals. I think, you can't expressly do that constitutionally, but the way that you do that is you encourage things to be locally owned. And like I just said, buy a buffer back to in the favor of residents purchasing homes but the purchasing power is ultimately going to be coming elsewhere. Like, it's very rare, unless you have a business, a small business that's really successful here, no one's going to be able to afford that. But to add to what you're saying, though, a lot of times the housing market is priced on what the market will bear. And currently, we had just experienced a lockdown for the past couple of years where the federal government was spending a lot of money and they had a really low interest rate. So they had to bring those interest rates down. And then we were able to see mortgage rates down in like the low 2%, which are historically low. But what happened is people realized that the mortgage payment is the thing that was driving the housing prices, because they realized they could sell their home for more because people were willing to take out more money and buy up the market, drive up the market, because instead of having a 6% interest and a $600,000 home, they're able to have a $950,000 home and a 2.5% interest, and the mortgage payment's about the same. I mean, mathematically, there's a way of finding that, but that's approximately what it was like. There was about a $300,000 to $400,000 inflation across the board just because of the low interest rates. And currently, the federal government is adjusting those interest rates up. So I believe we're going to see naturally a decline in interest as in desire to purchase homes here. And when those prices come back down, and then we have measures in place to encourage local ownership, reduce taxes, and streamline the processes to home ownership that make it possible for locals, you're going to see that change. And then that's not only just for home ownership. I do believe that a path to home ownership is the way to have self-empowerment for individuals and financial freedom and responsibility for their lives. But that's not an option for everyone, I understand. But when you bring the cost of home ownership down, that brings the cost of debt service, mortgages, and landlords that might own and sell and rent to somebody. You're going to bring the rental cost down.
I hear you. And I guess from being here so long, I've watched more and more people are renters. The jobs that will be able to support these median income, the prices are so high, and the percentages of non-Maui, I want to say, ownership are high. I don't know how we can bring it down. I almost think like we have to create another level of inventory that's selectively local and has different kind of rules. When you think that the interest rates going up are going to slow people from buying, maybe it will. And, there's no doubt in theory that it will. I just don't know if it's going to be quick enough to solve this extraordinary problem. That's why I was wondering, like, I was thinking to myself that the people that are now, we see a shift from people that were running and acting here locally, that they're now running at the state level. Why is that? Because they feel maybe that at the state level, they can affect changes. They're going to make what's going on local better. I wonder. I'm having a couple of conversations with people about that because I'm just wondering, these problems are so big, theoretical things are only, I don't know how to stop people. You think that there's not enough people that there are people in the world that will buy Maui less and lower our costs of housing. I don't think there's any way to lower the cost of housing. And I really think we have to somehow supplement the ability of the local people to buy it, however that be.
So that was just a suggestion that I threw out, the home ownership. But yeah, across the board, we need to have more ways of taking the government restriction down, lifting people up.
Did you see that in today's paper, Mazie Hirono came to Maui and said, we need more infrastructure here. I always am wondering, they bring up things, but then they don't find ways to pay for it. If you say you're running as a Republican, when I think Republican, I always think about fiscally conservative, which is why I'm going back to that kind of a theme, because a lot of social programs require a lot of money, and we've seen you've seen, I'm sure, that the dollar gets less and less valuable as we keep creating social programs out of money that doesn't exist, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. How do you stop that?
So for me, like you said, as a Republican, you associate with fiscal conservative, and I majored in finance. I manage business budgets and construction and stuff like that. So that's where I'm coming from as well.
Sure.
But the way conservatives and Republicans should encourage things is incentivizing them by taking less out of the transaction from the government perspective. So like I said, I'd be offering a tax credit, a relief. And when it comes to things like new small business, I support a lot of agriculture here as well. We need to have locally owned agriculture and locally owned investment in agriculture. So just like the federal government and the state issue construction bonds and stuff like that, but they'll also have agricultural bonds with low interest rates funded by different taxpayers. So the state's still getting something back on a 1% interest loan for a farmer to get more equipment or acquire a piece of land or something to grow crops and feed the families and feed the INA. And then also another thing that can be done is the state manages the taxing ability. So the general excise tax, currently we pay, actually Maui does pay the least. Every other island has a surcharge. Luckily Maui's mayor hasn't chosen to add on a surcharge, but we pay 4.167%. If we were to reduce and remove, I would support removing GET tax on food sales. That's just an instant 4% reduction in your food cost for the year. So you just got to chip away at all these little things that you can reduce and cut in the favor of people and residents here.
Well, the only thing I see an issue with that one would be, why are rich people that can afford, I guess because we're in America, so everyone benefits, but it really doesn't change it doesn't bring the bottom up anyway here. And there's so many people that are in that low.
I would argue that removing GET on food would certainly bring the bottom up. I mean, yes, of course, because across the board, if you do it across the board, everyone wins, right? But especially people who are going week to week and, paycheck to paycheck. Imagine a 4% reduction in your food cost. If you pay, $10,000 a year in food or whatever, and you're getting a reduction of $400, that's a lot,
I'm hearing, I wonder in practicality, I don't see it happening. I hear you. I don't really see that as being that meaningful. How do we get people to buy local food when producing it local costs more, right? And the cost of the land is all the things that factor in price. I can see how, again, theoretical it'll help, but I am just wondering, I'm where to get the money when we keep giving benefits back to the people, which I like benefits back to the people, but I'm trying to figure out how to have it make sense. How do we reduce the number of people and when we need services? How do we reduce the taxes for the people when we have to pay for them somehow? That's the challenge I see a legislature wrestling with. Where are their priorities? Are the like you're saying, your priority is a general priority, but right now, what do we do with the people that are homeless? How do we create it so that homeless isn't one lump idea? I mean, I don't know exactly what it takes to build emergency housing, but I keep thinking if we have an emergency and we need that many homes, we should be doing some kind of, even if it's tents. I mean, I don't really know what they do for when you have 100,000 or 50,000 people suddenly show up. And yet we're not dealing with that level. We're trying to push them into programs here. When I speak to most people here, they say, oh, the state controls that.
Yeah.
But do they?
So when I see the homeless problems, it's really rampant on Oahu, and unfortunately Maui is growing too. And I think that's just a sign of systematic failure, but also we do have a lot of homeless that are relocated here because it's warm and the climate's nice. During COVID, they were actually, if you didn't have an address you were staying in, they were pushing people away, and you could see that changed a little bit. Some of those people were returning, but right now they use some of the FEMA money on Maui to build up some temporary housing, and it's kind of semi-permanent now. I think it's on Wailea Avenue over on Wailuku, one of the parks. I forget what it's called.
You're talking about those 23 metal boxes with air conditioning.
Yeah.
And now they're going to lose them because they don't have the 23 families. It's not a lot of handling. I'm just thinking. That's why I say I don't really know why we can't deal with this like the military might and have more significant group housing and rules and opportunities for those people to have something to do other than just be sitting around, put them into programs to try to build some kind of direction for people.
Right. There's people, there's probably a couple different categories of homelessness. There's people who are economically unable to afford, housing, if they either have a low paying job or don't have a job at all. Then there's also a mental disability aspect too. So there's a health and social services side of that. And a lot of times that ends up being the county programs taking care of that. The state does have a Department of Health that could look into helping out people like that. But again, you're talking about programs that cost more money. A lot of times, unfortunately, these people won't be able to seek help. So it is a difficult issue. And certainly part of being a representative is willing to look out to and reach out to the people who are experts and take opinions and find out paths. You don't just say, I have all the answers, follow me. So I'm very strong on fiscal conservative, cost of living and things like that I believe would help everybody. Like I said, across the board, make it less expensive to live here. And then just from that, having lower costs of housing, driving down food prices, and making it more generally affordable, I do believe that would systematically reduce homeless in itself. I think if you provide
and who can
economic pictures.
So now, would that take legislation, you're thinking?
Yeah, so some of the stuff I was speaking about earlier, but talk about what we spend money on. If you can look into it, I don't know the current number, but I think it's somewhere around like $2.8 billion that Hawaii state taxpayers have paid to fund the rail project on Oahu. And right now, I for work, I go back and forth to Oahu all the time. I don't see that thing being used very often, but whatever. We got sunk cost. We signed up for it. We built it. We funded it. It currently runs from Kahului to Honolulu. And then that's being funded from 3 sources like HART. It's also got, I believe, some federal funding coming in, and the city and county is paying for a part of it as well. But my stance would be, I don't want to pay another single dime from Hawaii state taxpayer money, because it's already in the jurisdiction in the city of county of Honolulu. We've already paid a large amount of money to get the infrastructure there. I don't think it advances the interests of the people of Maui, Oahu, Kauai, or even, for that matter, Oahu, people who don't use that. So I wouldn't support the state money going to that anymore, within my ability. And then the county of Honolulu is a big revenue creator, and they can certainly finish the project.
Well, that was interesting. They can certainly finish it, and then not be used, right?
Yeah, at their expense. But like I said, there's different things that we can cut back. And, as a project manager, I've worked on state projects for, different jurisdictions of, schools, hospitals, airports. And I mean, to be honest, they don't do things the cheapest. They do have, competitive bids and stuff like that. But a lot of times what they spend money on, who's the decision makers, and, all the different hands that touch a transaction, I think could be looked at and streamlined as well. I'm speaking from some personal experience there, but yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that I could look into there with those programs.
Any things that you've been watching that you think you could be getting rid of? I'm just really just searching, like, if you're looking at all this stuff, because I always think that something's got to be done, for example, to cut. I don't know how you can help it. How do you cut costs to?
I can tell you one, as far as I do support education, and I want to make sure that teachers have an affordable cost of living, access to housing, and we have a teacher shortage where it's just not desirable to live or work here, so they're leaving. We need money in education as one of I think it's like 24% of our state's budget goes to education. We need to support teachers in the most effective ways. But like I said, it's not necessarily the answer is more money. It's auditing those programs and getting rid of wastefulness. I don't know to the extent from the outside as a citizen what's happening to do that. I would sure hope they're auditing programs and getting rid of fat, but from what I've seen and on the outside, my impressions, I'm not sure that that's happening. And then also to talk about, schooling and education, we get into, we're the last state masking our children and requiring everybody to get a COVID vaccine to play in sports, and all these things that are being done on the social level in school as well that I don't support. So definitely look to change the superintendent if I could, with whatever capacities I have. I know that likely would be the governor's opinion and ability to appoint or alter that, but yeah.
What other issues are important to you that you'd like to talk about? I mean, when I'm doing these shows, oftentimes people have pet projects or pet things that really got them interested. I can see that by your nature of being conservative financially, which I am. I don't always hold that to be a Republican trait, but I think it's a really important thing that we always look at, is being conservative, but trying to figure out where can we create, who can we tax more? Who can we get fees from? Or what are we going to do? Why is education money coming only from the state and not locally? Any thoughts about change? I've often heard that. Then in other states, monies for education come from a different pocket.
Yeah. So along those lines of, kind of intergovernmental coordination, there's a couple things, we talked about cost of living, agriculture, and just making it more appealing for people to live here across the board fairly. That's, been established. But for infrastructure, currently on Maui County, and especially for Upcountry residents, we don't have the water infrastructure. We don't have the ability to have, farming. And we're using currently a lot of just potable water to pour on our fields sometimes too for the smaller farms, because we don't have wastewater infrastructure reappropriated to, more sustainably use that wastewater for irrigating. And, every time you flush a toilet, you're flushing drinking water for the most part. So a lot of the new developments need to make sure that those things are included in there. So like whenever a new development is approved, that they get a new, when they run out of sewer line and utilities to it, they also run non-potables for the yards and irrigation and stuff like that. Make water more sustainable. If there's a green Republican, I guess maybe I would fall into that category. I support sustainability and, different renewable programs, because we live on an island. We have finite resources, and economically it makes more sense. I mean, I put solar on my house and different things like that. You can see I'm not really much of a salesman, but whenever I talk to somebody about solar, it's really easy to just show them the bottom line and what you're paying for, diesel fueled energy from the utility versus what you can do if you generate it yourself. There's a sustainability aspect and a financial aspect as well, just because of how expensive things are over here. Oh, but yes, in addition to that, the water shortages upcountry currently are, it's really kind of a complex issue, but if you might be aware of the details, but the Board of Water is sort of like a private company. The county is responsible, but then the state isn't really stepping in to pay for any improvements, and it just kind of ends up being, okay, well, we don't have water, or the pumps don't work, or the reservoir is dry. Sorry, water meter, you can get one in 28 years. Oh, you can't even sign up anymore. That's unacceptable. So I would work to get state funds for what I would spend money on in infrastructure to get, figure out if we can drill for a well, what that would cost, to get bids for that, to see what that would be, or surface collection.
Just one quick, I'm sorry. There's a lot of noise coming. Do you have wind there, or is there a microphone or something that's been moving?
Okay. Can you hear me all right? I might be the windows behind me. Let me go close those. It is a little windy.
Sorry about that. Well, it's interesting, Dan. Yeah, because it was suddenly we were competing to hear your voice.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I like this thing with Zoom. When you hold up different objects, you can see through them. It's very
fast. My water clouds.
When I say Republican, Democrat, if people take and throw those letters away and look, do you see very much difference I don't really see very much difference here locally between parties. It's just something I'm not real clear about. I mean, you don't seem that different than a Democrat, meaning a citizen who's concerned. You're aware about being fiscally responsible. You're interested in renewable energy. You're interested in keeping costs down, but giving powerful solutions to the people. And
thank you. Yeah, I mean, we really got to come together on this. I probably could have run as an independent, but I just chose to align with a party that I agreed with more. But it comes down to how we go about it, really. It comes from, some people will try to use extremes and different generalizations, but I'm not for that. I think that, at a core, people on the left are generally more trusting in government and would rather have big government manage. And then people on the right are more for personal responsibility and would rather have less restrictions. If that's a generalization.
I find myself, I think of myself as independent and green, like they're talking about a green Republican. So, some people say, well, that I have just like you. It sounds like we're talking the same language, but I'm just identified differently. Because I see that you're obviously, when you say you agree more with the Republicans and the Democrats, I think the Democrats are starting to get tired of their thing about building a big government. They'll lose
Yeah,
it on that one.
I do believe you're going to see a bunch of people walking away from the Democrat Party. I mean, we're talking about state issues, local issues, and that's ultimately the jurisdiction of our responsibility as far as the office that I'm talking about and looking at. But nationally, you see what's happening on the national scale, the different economic impacts and difficulties, and quite honestly, in my opinion, failures of the presidential administration. It's kind of like free marketing for Republicans, because I feel like most people in the midterm elections are going to change their mind on how they're voting. Because if you like how it's going, if you like $6 a gallon gas, $9 a gallon gas, whatever you feel about gas in general, whether if it's environmental concerns or whatnot, cost of living and our status and place in the world, I think you're going to see a bunch of people swinging back towards more conservative values and shift to vote Republican in November.
Well, it's interesting. We shall see. I know that to say the word Republican these days, that becomes a whole conversation that gets off into just a maze of stuff.
To be honest, even within Republicans, I don't think that we all agree. I don't think you can generalize, because there's Republicans who are the stereotypical, like, big business, profits only, no concerns for the people, which is a stereotype in an extreme. But nonetheless, like I was saying, conservative values should really use the government as a navigational tool, because the government doesn't create anything. The government just manages stuff. So if you use less taxes to encourage something, rather than mandating or making a quota or spending money on a program, if you encourage something to be done, it happens. Like, for instance, with the solar panels, like the idea of renewable energy, there's a tax credit. You're gonna spend X amount of money and pay the federal government, or the federal government or the state also offers a credit. In this example, they're just going to take less money from you to do something they want you to do. They're not going to mandate it. They're not going to, another example would be, like, a more authoritarian way would be to require it, mandate it, and make the, any new development required, which they do to some extent on some things. But what you do when you do that is you get people that don't want it, just driving up the cost of everything else across the board. So if you want to participate in this and you believe in it and you want to support it, you're going to get an incentive for doing it. And look what's happened. We've seen the growth of that economy. We've seen that whole industry grow by what is a conservative principle, by the idea of funding something with a tax credit, rather than creating a tax increase to create a bucket of money that goes to paying for those programs directly across the board. You know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting. What my mind was reeling back to was, I was in the solar business in the, you can imagine, 1980s, right? And I remember how there was a fight that they didn't want to offer tax credits because it didn't make economic sense. But sometimes you have to reach out before it makes economic sense to get enough volume so it can make economic sense. So
yeah, I mean, the cost of, it helped with the federal government doing it. A much bigger purchaser encouraging it was the entire American population. But on our state level as well, having another credit, it definitely subsidized the cost for a while, where the industry was kind of in infancy. And the first solar panel I set personally in 2012 cost like $800 for a 235 watt panel. And now for about like 150, or costs are going up again, unfortunately, but about 150 to $200, you could get a 400 watt panel. You know what I mean? Like, the technology's increased, costs have driven down, and a lot of that was on the back of the investment tax credit.
Have you any, what am I going to say? I'm fishing a little, only looking for different areas where, being in the legislature, have you spoken to any of the other legislators here? Any kind of idea of what they may need, or they have problems that they need help with? I haven't. I'm just curious if you have any kind of interaction with any others from the state legislature these days.
Yeah, so that's one of the nice things about being a candidate, and at least within my own party, I've been able to be introduced to there's only 4 of them, but I was able to meet, the different legislators that are here. We have 4 seats and 1 senator. But yeah, we were able to talk and get input on their experience, how, just logistically things work, and then also developing a platform, what the, initiatives are. So that's one nice thing about having a party is sometimes they'll help encourage you and build your growth and development with that kind of stuff. But then I brought a lot of my own ideas as an independent as well, like my ideas on housing, cost of living, and agriculture are all my ideas, right? So yeah, just being able to have that open discussion is really nice.
I'm sure you're contributing to their increasing base of.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of people are going to adopt my tax credit for sale to local resident or primary owner occupant.
It's just to me, I keep wondering, like we say, it's such a small number. It's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm only thinking
do what you can. And
like how do you move an 800-pound gorilla, right?
Yeah,
with a spoon.
But yeah, it's definitely an interesting time that we live in too. To be honest, the main reason that I'm running is because of the lockdowns and the restrictions and mandates, requirements. I mean, on Maui, you saw we literally had the National Guard on the highway telling you if you're an essential citizen or doing an essential purpose for a short period of time there. I know that's what my grandfather fought in World War II, and that's ultimately what brought everybody to Hawaii and my family on that side. I don't think that people stormed the beaches of Normandy or fought for our country to come home and say that you can't have a job as a firefighter because you're unvaccinated, or you can't have your kids play in school, or you can't have a job, or there's all these restrictions. Regardless, take the substance of the thing out, whatever you feel about it. Either way, it should be your own choice, your own opinion. And I don't think that you should be able to fire somebody for what they do or don't do. And a lot of these things contributed to that too. And I got a 5-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter that are going to go into the public school system next year. And, come, what is it, like August something when they start, if they still have that mask mandate, I've been fighting it, and I'll be fighting it as an individual citizen, but I'd also like to fight it as a legislator as well. So some of those things with personal freedom, civil liberties, personal responsibility, and putting the power back into people's hand more so than the government, and put restrictive authority on emergency privileges. So like the governor, mayor, whoever executive privilege is claiming an emergency, I think that should be the obligation of the court to review, and not the obligation of a citizen or the burden of a citizen to have to sue for their freedom. Because that's currently how it is. If you don't like it, you got to sue and then go through the whole lawsuit process. And that's why we had the mask mandates on airplanes until a district judge of the Supreme Court in Florida finally kicked it out. But it took 2 years to get there. So this is, at least on the state level, I don't want to restrict the governor's ability to act in case there is a big hurricane or an invasion of another country. He's got to be able to act. But nonetheless, it should be the responsibility of the courts to review it. And I think there should be harsh privileges. If it's deemed that you overstepped, you abused power, I think impeachment is a nice thing to throw in there as a consequence. At the very least, a cease and desist.
When I hear the word impeachment, you just sort of open my ears to something. You think that stuff in the national level is going to resolve, or are we going to always be fighting over this stuff?
You know what? With what issue?
I don't think there's any fight between the right and the left about freedom and choice of masks. I hear people that are very left and very right. And the people that are in the middle often think that those groups are together, but they're not. It's
you do have advocates on both sides for either way. it's really a nonpartisan issue. But
Right,
I'm
on a national issue, when I hear the word impeachment and this thing about Trump and impeachment and January 6th and all this stuff, I don't know if local, with being us a small place, whether that becomes an issue at all in your.
Well, I mean, that's in the past, really. I mean, and also it's a federal issue from, what is it, like 2 years ago now. So
To you and I, but yet
yeah.
we hear it a lot out of people's mouths still. And I had a candidate on the other side who's running for state house bring it up, and it's like I didn't really know if it was something that was somehow discussed, or like you say, it was individuals that are pulling it up and playing with that.
Well, right. I mean, sometimes it's a conversational point. You want to see where someone feels about something. I was talking about impeaching an executive branch of our government, because I wouldn't, as a state legislature, have any authority to have any decision on a federal level.
No, I'm just saying, when I heard the word impeachment, that's what's triggering me, because even in this election cycle, people are bringing it up again, even though it has, like you say, we have nothing to do with it, but somehow is one of their decided talking points. So I'm glad that you're not. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to look for apologies if I brought it up.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I just triggered me. I'm only triggered because I'm speaking to a lot of different people, gotcha. And it often makes me think, well, why are we talking about that? But impeachment, like you say, that's a very big step. And again, what is that? When we have impeachment, maybe we're improving the future, but we are living with the problems from the past, which we seem to do a lot around here. Like,
well, right. I mean, the idea isn't to just be throwing people out all over the place. It's to make, it established that your job is to govern and lead the people, not arbitrarily be there and deciding every step of every day of their life. You know what I mean? You're supposed to look out, provide, and protect the people. So then don't overstep. Is really don't usurp your authority, but with inalienable rights, quite honestly, of citizens.
Anything that you're going to be talking to the voters and wanting to give them a reason to vote for you, and anything, like to give you a place to do that if you can.
Oh, sure. Thanks. But yeah, I mean, my name is Dan Johnson. I'm from Maui, born and raised here, multi-generational. I have a family here. I love living here. I want to make sure that my children have a place to grow up, and then they get to make their own choices and navigate their own lives, because I don't think that I know any better about your life and your decisions and what you want to do than you. You're the best person to author your own fate. So vote for me is like a vote for you, because I'm for the people, and Maui first, Maui people.
Well, Dan, thank you for joining me here. You're an important guest, and I really must say you're very well spoken, and you support your issues as you're talking them with specifics. That's very appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah.
How novel.
Yeah, I just want to see stuff get done. I'm a worker. You put me in and I'll do it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So everyone out there, I just want everyone to know this is Dan Johnson, State House District 12. And if you're in his area and you see the name Johnson, please realize you can vote for him. He's a really dynamic man, and he's going to be here with his family and wants to be part of solving the problems that we've got. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for coming. And thank all you out there in video, audio land. And I hope you'll visit us again. And you can watch this interview again. Go to MauiNeutralZone.com or go up on YouTube and put Dan Johnson, Jason Schwartz, and up it'll come. Thank you, Dan. Be well.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. See you again.